advanced recruiting.
When it comes to Talent Talk Radio Show, brought to you by People G2, a nationwide leader in background checks and employment screening solutions. People G2 gives their clients access to the best human capital management and due diligence tools available. They are dedicated to helping their clients with all of their people-related decisions. To learn more, go to www.peopleg2.com. Talent Talk centers on the topics of talent recruitment and management, leadership development, company culture, and employee engagement. These are all timely topics for CEOs, entrepreneurs, HR professionals, and business leaders. We hope that as you tune in to listen each week, whether to the live broadcast or to the podcast on iTunes or iHeartRadio, that you hear something you can take away that will help you grow and impact your career in a positive way. And now, here's the host of the Talent Talk Radio Show, the founder and CEO of People G2, Chris Dyer.
Good afternoon, and thank you for tuning in here to Talent Talk. And joining me as I have two great guests lined up in the studio. We're going to change the format up just a little bit. We're going to have both guests for the entire time. And as some of you know, or maybe the case this is the first time you're tuning in, welcome. And really the way the show works is I have had the privilege of meeting some really inspiring leaders, some cool people in sort of my discovery of talent and culture, and everything kind of makes me excited about people and working environments. And instead of me being the only one to have maybe a conversation about that, we decided to create this radio show where we can have this conversation, let other people listen in and contribute and even ask questions. And even that allows us to kind of record that and then keep that around so other people can hear that conversation over and over again if they'd like to. So we are here every Tuesday, 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And you can access us live, but most people pop in on the podcast after the fact. So we're on iTunes. You can hear us on iHeartRadio. There's several other stations that carry it later on. And we've amassed a really great following. Over 10,000 of you a day are coming in and downloading one of the podcasts from one of the various platforms. So big thank you to everyone who's showing up, who's listening, who's sharing. All that is really important to keeping the show going. One of our favorite things is to get some interaction, and we love to do that on Twitter. So if you have a question for one of my guests today live, you can send it to @PeopleG2 and use that hashtag Talent Talk. My producer, Mike, tries to feed me in some of those good questions as we're going, and then we try to work them into the show. If it's after the fact, don't worry. I'm sure our guests, I know I would certainly appreciate any comments or questions you have on Twitter after the fact, and we'll still try to do our best to interact with those questions later on. So as I said, we have two guests here for the whole show. We have Herb Callahan, Senior Director of Human Resources for Golden State Foods, back. This is his second time on the show, so happy to have him in here. And then he also brought along Ed Rodriguez, the Chief Human Resources Officer for Golden State Foods. So we've got the superpowers of HR at the Golden State Foods, which is a local company, but also around the whole country, but they're located here locally. And so we're glad to have them in here, and we're going to talk about everything we can around their company, HR, culture. But let's go ahead and get them into here, and we'll start with Ed. Maybe you could introduce yourself, Ed, and tell us a little bit about your background and what you're doing over there with Golden State Foods.
Sure. Thanks for having us here this morning. I'm a local product, born and raised in Southern California. Attended Huntington Park High School, UC Santa Barbara undergrad, USC graduate school, and received my PhD from Chapman University last year. Been in HR for 25 years. 16 of those years I spent with PepsiCo, East Coast, West Coast, Mexico, covering Europe. Left PepsiCo in 2011 to work for another local company called Ventura Foods. Spent 5 years with them and joined Golden State Foods a year ago in July of 2016. So I'm responsible for all of HR, including talent management, labor relations, total rewards, and everything under the HR umbrella.
All right, everything under the sun, yeah. And Herb, why don't you introduce yourself as well, and what what you do over there, and what you've been doing also since the last time you were on the show.
Sure. So I'm not locally grown. I grew up right outside of Boston, a place called Lynn, Massachusetts. Joined the military right out of high school. So I've been doing the civilian HR thing for about 15 years. I retired in 2005 from the Marine Corps, but I've been with Golden State Foods for about 5 years. Just hit my 5-year anniversary, the end of July, I think it was. So I'm the senior HR director. I primarily oversee the HR for one of our business groups, the McDonald's distribution group. 10 facilities, about 1,700 employees. I also work closely with Ed on our university. We have an internal GSF University, and any other OD initiative that Ed brings to the plate,
Right.
which is a lot of great things we're going to talk about today. Yeah, so that's me.
Well, great. Well, Ed, maybe you can kind of start us off here with talk about what your first year has been like with Golden State Foods, coming from PepsiCo and Ventura Foods. I mean, you have some experience with, it sounds like in the industry, but also with really, big lots of employees, that sort of, which is a different realm for everyone that comes in here. So maybe you could talk a little bit about the differences between the companies and what you've seen.
Sure. No, I think it's been an amazing experience. The receptiveness to some of the initiatives and some of the ideas that have been introduced over the last 12 months has been surprisingly and refreshingly positive.
Mm-hmm.
I think the time was right in GSF's growth story to look to outside opportunities to build on the great culture that has been established. It's a great company. We refer to it as the best company you've never heard of. It's
Right.
$6 billion in revenue, multinational. We have grown from one customer and 1.5 billion to 6 billion and 125 customers across the world. And it's just been a great experience to introduce some new concepts that are building on the culture and on our creed and our values and this notion of giving back through our GSF Foundation. So I think I've experienced some of that at larger companies. Ventura Foods was 2.5 billion, 2,500 employees. So I think working for a $6.5 billion business is a really good sweet spot for me, and it's allowed me to partner with the folks who've built a great culture and introduce new concepts that I think are taking us to the next level.
Right. And if you get to come back and be local, that can't hurt either.
Yeah, no, we moved around quite a bit in my career, and my wife said once our oldest child got to 5th grade, she was going to clip my wings, and I had to figure out where I wanted to be moving
Right.
forward.
Right. Yeah, can't move them around too much when they get up that age.
Right.
Well, and this is a question for either of you, and maybe you both want to give us your perspectives. As we kind of look down the road, maybe 5 to 10 years, what do you see as sort of the landscape in employment, and how does that look specifically for your company, and maybe how it might change or evolve between now and then?
Well, I think one of the great things about Golden State Foods is we're just such a diverse company in the different things that we do. We've got distribution companies, we've got food manufacturing, so 5 or 6 different pieces of business. So trying to look at the landscape and see how each one of those is going to be impacted and making predictions is probably pretty challenging, and I'm glad Ed does that and I don't have to. But we have some tactical challenges, right? We're a distributor, so there's a national shortage on drivers that we have to stay ahead of.
Right.
But one of the things we're doing, our customer changes, the workforce changes. One of the things that we're doing, well, quite a few things we're doing to stay ahead of that is really taking a different look at our past recruiting practices and changing things. Recently, we've done a lot with the military. We're recruiting with partnering with the Army Reserve. We're visiting Camp Pendleton, doing some recruiting down there. We've created a military advisory council recently, so we're looking to get that up and running. But just looking at our practices, being laser focused on the things that work. No longer are we taking this kind of broad brush approach to the workforce, but really focusing in on what works and taking advantage of the successes there.
Right.
I talked about driver recruiting, which is a challenge for everybody, but we're partnering with driver schools, right? Reaching out to the driver schools and looking at how do we recruit directly from the school rather than just the old-fashioned put up a sign, put something on the back of your truck, put a poster or a sign on your facility. But we're trying to get out there and really connect with where the drivers, where the type of drivers that we need, and how can we bring those folks aboard.
That's some really fantastic jobs out there, both at your company and other companies, that are not in the traditional sense of what we think about, right? And so someone could go and become a driver or some other job, that is not the one that everyone tells them they have to go get. They have to go to college and they have to go get this one kind of job. And it ends up being more money. I know a lot of people that finally figured out they could be making $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 more a year by going to this other job they would have never thought of and never done. And so is at some level maybe in society that will shift, but until that happens, that's a job you guys have to go out and tell that story and talk about the value of thinking about a job that maybe, no one sixth grade teacher was saying one day you're going to go up and be a truck driver.
Sure.
Right? That's just, we don't say that. We probably should,
Yeah.
but we're not talking about that. So how do you start to maybe attack some of that idea? How do you go after that?
Yeah, that's a wonderful insight, and one of the underlying notions in what Herb has talked about and what we're trying to achieve is we're trying to expand the talent pipeline. So we've heard quite a bit about the labor shortage and the pending changing of the guard from a generational perspective. And if you think about it, I don't know the exact figures, but I think it's about 30% of the general population has a bachelor's degree, 10% has a master's, and 1 or 2% has a professional degree. Well, we'd like to tap into that 70% for whom college isn't an immediate choice right after high school. And we consider ourselves at GSF a brick and mortar startup. So we have great jobs that pay $50,000, $60,000 a year. In addition to that, our value proposition includes a great set of benefits, which includes tuition reimbursement. So we'll pay full-time associates after 6 months on the job up to $5,000 to go out and get their degree, go to junior college, pursue their academic goals. And so it's a place that you can come, join, and grow. And you don't have to subscribe to this notion that once you're a warehouse loader or a driver, that's what you have to do for the next 40 or 50 years. If that's what you choose to do, we've got opportunities for you to do that throughout the world.
Right.
If you decide you want to advance your career, we have places for you to go and places and ways for you to grow. And we're proud about offering that opportunity to folks who think about joining GSF.
And those are things that you have to start thinking about. How do you get that message to those people? Have you started to find some ways to be effective at doing that? I don't want you to give away any recruiting secret sauce here, but I mean, are there things that you guys have started to develop that have starting to see success to get that job accomplished?
Well, I think some of the a few years ago they weren't so traditional, but now it's the social media, it's the LinkedIn,
right?
It's Twitter, it's Facebook. So we're connected. And just telling our story, not necessarily going out looking to recruit. That's the benefit of folks get to know who we are. I think 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago, we had about 1,000 followers on LinkedIn. Now we're past 12,000, just over the past couple of years. So they're really traditional means right now, just the social networking and telling the story, giving back. Ed mentioned our foundation. I mean, it's something that's at the core of everybody in the company is this desire to give back, and we do a lot with our foundation, and just being able to tell that story helps us recruit. So I think what we've learned over the last couple of years is we need to do a better job at telling our story, because it's a good story to tell, and that's how we get folks in. Ed talked about. If folks want to join, we have a place where they can come and grow. That's one of the benefits of having such a diverse company and such a big company. There's just so many great stories to tell about folks that have been promoted internally, folks that have been with the company for 30 years and now leading their own facility. So we have such a great story to tell, and I think we're doing a better job at telling that story.
Right. Well, I know one of the primary kind of journeys you've been under the HR umbrella has really changed the culture of the company from a competency-based environment to a performance-based culture, which is a pretty radical change and a pretty hard thing to do. So maybe we can kind of break this up in a couple parts. Maybe the kind of overall question on culture is to, how do you really make that decision to transform it? Where does that come from? And why did you maybe want to make that shift?
Yeah, I'd say it's a work in progress for us. We're in the midst. You don't transform a culture in 10 or 12 months. It's a multi-year process.
Not a good culture in 10 or 12 months.
Exactly.
We can screw it up in that amount of time.
Exactly. No, but I would say that for us, it's this notion that the world around us is changing, and so consumers are changing. Consumer preferences are trending more towards the healthy. Customers are changing. It's becoming more competitive. You see a lot of consolidation. You see a lot of focus on cost management, and future generations of workers are having different thoughts around work-life balance and their expectations of what they want to get out of that employment experience. So for us, I call it more of an evolution than anything else. We're building on a great culture that's really kind of centered on our creed and values. But we're also saying in order for us to compete, not just today and tomorrow, but in the next 5 or 10 years, we do have to put an emphasis on performance and metrics and KPIs to balance out the culture that we're trying to create, and balance out that that agility and that process orientation that we need to have moving forward. At the same time, we're also doubling up on our investment in development as part of that process. So there's a performance component, which is going to be based on metrics and KPIs that are going to help us stay ahead versus playing catch up. And then within that, there's an investment in the individual growth of our associates, which is, hey, how do you develop professional skill sets for the job that you're doing today to help you do that job better? But also, in tandem with tuition reimbursement and other outside development activities, how do you grow into other potential roles within our company as you think about your career over the next 5 or 10 or 20 years?
So one of the things that I've sort of talked about or kind of really advocated for is that people look at having metrics, right? How do you measure? How do you have metrics? How do you know, right? Whatever it is you know. Because I think for a long time people think they know what's happening, right? They make decisions, and now we have this incredible amount of data that we can pull we didn't used to have 30 years ago. So is that a part of the component to put in that performance-based culture, is to adding in measurement, adding in those kind of metrics so that you can see what's working, so that you can see who's doing a great job, who should be promoted and moved up and do all of that? Is that what it's about, or is there more to it than that?
No, I think it's about the metrics, and we have metrics today, and we had them in the past at GSF. So the introduction of metrics isn't something that's new. What we're trying to take a look at is drilling deep into some of those metrics, and I can give you an example.
Sure, that'd be great.
You know, companies can look at their overall turnover, and I think sometimes the overall turnover hides opportunities. So your overall turnover might be 20%, but within that 20%, you might have high turnover roles that in the first 90 days or 180 days, in the first year, 2 or 3 years, you have 60% turn within some of those roles. So I think it's drilling deep into the metrics and saying, okay, let's not just stop at turnover. Let's understand where the pinch points are and where we have opportunities to explore, opportunities to make a difference, because these are customer-facing jobs, frontline roles in some cases. And from an HR standpoint, what that sometimes does is it gives us an opportunity to take a look at our onboarding process and connect the dots between creating a welcoming environment for new associates, not losing them at hello, and really creating a great experience that's going to cause them to reinforce their decision to join our company.
Absolutely. Go ahead. I think
I say, just to add on to that, one of the things that we also looked at, we talked about where we have some significant, not significant, but where's the turnover happening. We realized that with some of our frontline supervisors, we had more turnover than we wanted. So we went to the field, we got input, we said, what can we do? And one of the things that we've done recently, and it's really starting to grow some legs, is we've built this frontline leader certification course designed for our first-time frontline supervisors to help a lot of things, to help us drive metrics and increase productivity, but to provide them a career path and some training that may slow some of that turnover. And it's gotten a great reception, and we're now starting to take that across the company. We've done our Midwest facilities, we're doing our Southeast facilities, so it's really starting to grow some legs. And all that was based off of doing a deep dive, as Ed said, getting past the 20%, really drilling in, where's that turnover and what can we do about it?
Yeah, because 20% doesn't mean anything if, it's 5% at most jobs and 60% at a few other jobs, right? Because 20% is completely deceiving if it's broken up into pieces. So, well, it's fascinating stuff. We're going to go to our first commercial break, and we're going to come back and keep diving into this topic on culture and everything else with Golden State Foods. We'll be right back after this quick commercial break.
Imagine buying a newspaper and discovering that the news you're reading is 6 months old. There isn't much that stays the same for 6 months, and the same thing goes for background checks. In a time when so much outdated information is being passed around, it's good to know that People G2 offers something different. At People G2, we provide today's intelligence, not yesterday's news. Our value-added approach offers you a fully FCRA-compliant solution that includes up-to-the-minute information. By combining industry-leading technology with old-school human investigation, People G2 is able to give you information that is accurate right now, delivered quickly through our online system, or integrated with your HR system. So ask yourself, are you comfortable working with old news, or are you ready for a different kind of background check company? Visit peopleg2.com or call 800-630-2880. That's 800-630-2880 or peopleg2.com.
Welcome back to the Talent Talk Radio Show. Don't forget, if you've missed any of today's show, we'll have it back up on iTunes and iHeartRadio here in a couple weeks. You can also go to talenttalkradio.com anytime and check out past episodes. So while we were at commercial, we were sort of talking a little bit about, is this normal? Kind of the great work that you're doing at the company, and we kind of decided it's not, right? There's a lot of things that you're doing. And so this is kind of good little segue into one of the things I was going to ask you, which is, there are some very positive things that you're doing here. And so maybe you could talk about, that was the first revelation for you, is it kind of getting that story out, right?
Sure. Yeah, we realize that we don't tell. It's a humble company, and by design and just by the style of leaders that are within that company, we don't go out and sell ourselves. So it kind of wasn't in our nature. And I think for me, over the past couple of years, as folks were coming in, and I could see the excitement as we talked about the university, or as we're talking about this Frontline Leader Certification course, we're increasing our tuition assistance or our partnership with local universities. Folks like, wow, you do a lot. And we're realizing from an HR perspective, from a recruiting perspective, that's important. That's going to help us with recruiting. It's going to help us with retention. So we realize we do a lot of great things to attract talent and to keep talent. To us internally, it feels like it's the right thing to do, so it doesn't feel as special as it really is. So that's the challenge with, we've got to sell that, we've got to talk about that more, because it is special. Mm-hmm. We do a lot of great things, and we need to talk about it more.
The other idea that's driving some of this thinking for us is really responding to some of the changing dynamics in the workplace. So I think we have a much more mobile employee workforce out there. We've gone away from pensions and 401ks, and I think the new generation or the next generation is looking at their career as a tour of duty versus a 40-year journey. And so one of the things we've talked about is that, quite frankly, we have to work harder to attract and retain the talent that we're going after. And that's driving some of the thinking behind the recruiting initiatives that we're putting out there, the onboarding, the focus on training our supervisors. There's a whole employee life cycle, right, that starts from the attraction to the interview process, to the onboarding, to the quality of your supervisors, to the culture that you have. And we're trying to look at that whole spectrum and say, where do we have strengths and opportunities, and where can we invest our energies to make sure that once we get those folks through our front door, they don't leave out the back door.
So, one of the, I would say, maybe difficulties when you're looking at data and you're want to challenge some of these areas that have been problematic for you is, do you focus on problems, or do you focus on the things that are working well, right? I mean, do you go and find out why those frontline managers are staying? What is it they like about it? What is it that they're good at? Or do you focus on why the other ones are leaving? This is always kind of depends on how you look at it, and it's kind of an interesting way. But maybe we could talk about what's working right now for your cultural transformation. What are some of the things that you see really going well that you're happy with? Maybe were surprises to you, anything like that?
Yeah, I think I'll answer with my perspective and then turn it over to Herb. It really is trying to prioritize where you spend your energy, because there's 99 things that we can go after,
right?
But they're not all of equal value. And so what we found, and again, not different than what you might see in the industry, is there's really two reasons that associates leave our employment. One is they have a bad supervisor, and the second reason is they weren't the right hire. They weren't a good fit for our culture. And so what we've done is we've spent a lot of time and energy on that first one, which is building the capability of our supervisors.
Right.
And we have this this theory that if we get that right, that'll have a positive impact. In addition to investing in hiring the right folks and onboarding them correctly and appropriately. But if we invest in that supervisor interacts with our frontline associates far more than Herb or I are the CEO of the company. Those supervisors represent the company and convey everything there is to know about GSF from an associate experience. So that's where we spend a lot of time and energy. Herb mentioned it with the frontline certification process. It's unique to GSF. It's taking best practices and really making sure that from a coaching and from a developing, from a communication standpoint, we're spending our energy on the folks that touch our front line every day.
Right.
Yeah, I think, so as we're looking at what works best, one of the great things about having, I think we're 45 plus locations around the world, probably 25 plus within the States. One of the great things, and I shared this with Ed, is so it starts with the data, right? What's the data telling you there's an issue somewhere? And then look at one of these 25, 26 locations, who's doing it well, and what are they doing?
Right.
One of the things that, and everything that Ed brings to the table and the things that we work on, somebody's probably already done it in one of our facilities and piloted and said, hey, that really worked well for us. So we look at the data, where are the issues, what's the data telling us, and then get feedback from the field. Right? Don't whatever you're working on, you've got to get past the data. You've got to get out there and ask the folks what's going on, what's working well, what's not working so well. And Ed and I take road trips all the time just to gather data back from the field. So again, the great thing is we almost don't think of anything original because somebody's probably already tried it, and we can reach out to them and say, is it working well? The other thing I think that we do well, and Ed does this well, is the old appreciative inquiry, right? What can it be? What can it look like? And why? I look at recruiting. We asked ourselves, what can it be? What can we do? How can we make this better? What should it look like? And really just unleash folks' potential to go after it.
Right.
So somebody's probably already doing something that works well, so let's tap into that. And let's cause people to think and dream about what can it be, what should it be, and why aren't you going after that?
Yeah, and I love that because when you said, well, we went back to that one facility that maybe is doing it well, that's really like the positive dissonance, right, which comes from the appreciative inquiry. And that's my favorite way to go out and try to figure something out. Who's doing it well, right, and what are they doing? Because ultimately you end up finding like a personality type, you find a skill set, you find a process, you find something, and you go, great, that's what we need to do.
Not replicate it.
And replicate it. Not go back and try to change this or get rid of this person. Or whatever, do that first. And that usually seems to work pretty well. Not always. Sometimes you have to come up with bigger initiatives, but yeah.
Well, we joke sometimes. We look for the bright spots. Some people call them best practices, but when we have a problem or an opportunity, we look for the bright spots internally and externally. And then there's a really simple model that we follow. We go and do our due diligence and find out why it's working the way it's working and what those folks are doing. And then we extrapolate that. We lift and shift and say, okay, where can we pilot this to see if we can see if that works in another location. And then we take the 80-20 approach. We don't design 100% of any initiative. We design 80% of it, and then we allow local managers and leaders to customize and localize the material so that it fits their own unique needs. So we don't have one culture at GSF. We have 45 subcultures. They're all branded under our creed and values, but every one operates uniquely. So I think that approach for us in the first 12 or 13 months has created pull versus push. So you have folks calling Herb and I saying, can I get this, can I get that, or is there any way you can work with us on this project or on this initiative? And that's a wonderful place to be in from an HR perspective, where folks are asking you for time and resources versus you trying to sell them on an initiative that you think is important.
How do you as a HR department then maybe make sure that your time, you mentioned it kind of a little bit ago, you could be doing 99 things, right? And maybe just the one or two things that are really going to be effective. They're going to give you that huge 80% push. So how do you make that decision on what's valuable to continue doing or to consider doing, and what do you push aside? Did you guys have a process or a way in which you think about that?
We have a framework, and I'll start with there's 3 components of our framework, and then maybe Herb can add a little color commentary. It's really, number 1, elevate our talent acquisition efforts, and that's a broad bucket. The second is focus on process agility and technology, and the third is evolve our performance-based culture. So there's really kind of 3 broad buckets that our team is focused on. We've aligned that with our CEO and our senior team, gotten head nods from them to say, yeah, those are the 3 most important things that you ought to focus on. Now, conceptually, those 3 things have a number of tentacles underneath them.
Of course.
but if you ask me, if you ask my team, if you ask Herb, if you ask our line clients, what are you working on? I can always repeat those 3 things. And within those 3 things, if it fits within that filter, we're working on it. If it doesn't, we're not working on it. It has to get in queue for the next cycle or the next opportunity to work on that. But I think conceptually building a framework around 3 key areas that you're focused on, I think helps the organization understand, what you think is important, what's aligned with the business and our customers, and really create some of that pull that we talked about earlier.
Well, I think you're spot on, and we talked about this a little bit before coming over this essentialism, right? Doing the things that matter, that fit within that framework, and are going to have an impact, right? So I think we look closely, and we don't have to do a deep dive on everything to see what the return is, but does it fit within that framework? And if it doesn't, then let's, maybe it's a 2018 initiative, maybe it's a 2019 initiative. It doesn't have to be done right now if it doesn't fit within that framework.
And there's an opportunity cost for everything, right? Any time I spend on one item, I have to give up time I spend on another item. Right. And the perfect example I can give you is recently I had some leaders come up to me and to Herb and say, hey, we'd like you guys to think about a formal internship program company-wide. And we said, well, okay, in order for us to do that and to do it right, we have to invest the time to understand what the issue is and best practices and design a system. What else on the plate would you like to fall off for us to invest in internships?
Right.
And we went through that prioritization exercise, and at the end of the day, they said, you're absolutely right. That's something we can maybe pilot or test in a couple of locations, but from a broader focus standpoint, maybe that falls into 2018 or 2019. And you have to repeatedly go through that process to validate and align with your line clients to make sure that you are focused on the most important things that matter to our company and to our customers.
Yeah, so I'd say saying no is not a bad thing. No, not right now is not a bad thing.
Right.
And folks recognize that, hey, they're focused. They're working on the things they should be working. That's why it's not a priority right now. So it's become a good thing, whereas, traditionally saying no may not come across so well. But if we stay focused and we work within that framework, folks know there's a reason we're not doing it right now.
Well, and it's great that you have that process in place, because if you have someone that comes to you that has an idea and has passion around it, you suddenly get multiple managers come and say that this was something that was important. How do you go through that process to determine that? And it's really great to see that you have that in there, as opposed to shiny object saying yes when maybe you couldn't have done a good job, or B just had said no, and then now they feel discouraged. You took them through that for them to see where that fits into the whole process. So that's a bit of transparency, a bit of clarity for everyone involved, but I think ultimately keeps your particular department very focused, right?
Yep. And I say the one other thing that we do quite a bit is reach out and get feedback, right? Reach out to the leaders that are out in the field, and not to all 6,500 associates, but reach out to the influencers, the opinion leaders, and ask them for feedback before we give something a hard no.
It kind of almost sounds like you're getting feed forward there, right? You're asking what they need going forward, what they really want there, as opposed to maybe feedback being more what you guys have already done, right? You're asking them for what they want to see kind of in the future.
Right.
Right.
Well, and I go back to this frontline leaders certification course. We call it boot camp. Those were operational leaders that put this together. We just went out and facilitated a meeting. What do you need? What are you looking for? What can help out? Is this really going to give you the return you want? And we built something around their needs.
Right. And I bet you it was the boot camp was the military guy's idea, right? Well, you have so many kind of good things going on. Are there areas where maybe there isn't quite so much light that you're trying to shine some better light on? There are things that are still challenging. We talked about, getting drivers, and there's some areas there. Are there other things that you're ultimately thinking about that you need to put some energy around?
Well, I think we're in the midst of a new human capital management implementation. So we're operating with an older, bit antiquated system, which can be a little frustrating to the HR team and to the end users. We can't get to tomorrow quick enough. We're gonna go live on our new system, which is UltiPro, which we selected earlier this year on January 1st for payroll, for HR, and for benefits. And that's going to make a dramatic difference in terms of helping us become more automated and more paperless, and ensuring that the process or the templates or the paperwork doesn't get in the way of the intent when we talk about performance management and having a good, crisp, clean HR process around talent management. So that's the only part. I think there's light at the end of that tunnel, but boy, I wish I can get there sooner than later.
Right. Well, that's a big shift, and not only culturally, but just tactically. I mean, just all the things that have to be, you have to manage one system, get another one up and going, and I mean that's. Yeah, I don't envy you at all.
We keep telling people it's short-term pain for long-term gain.
Right.
So when we get there, it'll be a wonderful thing.
Yeah.
Well, and folks are really engaged and excited. That's another piece of any initiative is keeping feedback and providing updates. The HR team is really excited about this whole process. And even with any, sizable implementation, there's pain and training, getting together, and at one point we'll run parallel systems for a little bit, I'm sure. But just keeping folks engaged and updated keeps the excitement there.
I think our approach also has operated under this leader-led mindset. So our CEO knows how important getting systems that work for us and help us work more efficiently and effectively, and how much that matters. That project is co-chaired by myself and our CFO, so we didn't delegate that to a director level or an IT level or an HR level in the organization. We took ownership, and this is sort of a roll-up-your-sleeves culture. So we're in the details, making sure that not only are we managing through the process and the system changes, but that we're also managing through the change management that's entailed in folks maybe doing things differently than they have in the past, and not letting that go to chance.
Now you mentioned leader-led. Can you talk more about that?
Yeah, I think it's just we got early head nods on our framework and our priorities and our approach from our CEO and the executive committee, which is comprised of the top 5 or 6 executives at the company. So when we started this journey 12 or 13 months ago, we met as an HR team, and we aligned on what we thought the priorities were based on the history and the past and the future challenges. And we aligned that agenda before we went to managers or supervisors or the field. We started with our CEO and that executive committee, and we said, this is where we're going to spend our time and our energy. Are you aligned with this approach? They gave us feedback, shaped that agenda. But once we aligned and held hands and sang Kumbaya, that was the agenda we ran with. And I think that's made all the difference. Not that the CEO is going to drive all of the change, but having the CEO and his executive committee behind the framework that you're driving and the priorities that you're putting out to the organization helps in terms of laying the framework for successful implementations of the initiatives that we're working on.
Well, it sounds like you're doing a great job of getting that initial kind of really important factor, which is that senior buy-in has to be there, right? The organization at that level has to say yes. And then you have to get into step 2, and we're going to talk about what step 2 is after this quick commercial break here with Herb Callahan and Ed Rodriguez of Golden State Foods.
Imagine what it would feel like to lose everything. Your job, your home, your family, your dignity. This has happened to thousands of the men, women, veterans, and young adults we serve at Working Wardrobes. What do we do to help? We provide career development services, life skills workshops, job skills training. We provide the perfect interview outfit, and we get clients placed in jobs. Call Working Wardrobes, 714-210-2460. Donate, volunteer, invest, hire.
When it comes to pioneers in their respective industries, we all know the Apples, Starbucks, and Trader Joe's of the world. In the realm of recruiting, Decision Toolbox is the industry's best-kept secret, with 90% of their business from referrals and repeat customers. For over 20 years, Decision Toolbox's U.S.-based team of recruiters, sourcers, professional writers, quality personnel, and tech support has perfected a Six Sigma approach to talent management. No matter the size of the project, Decision Toolbox delivers incredible results. A cost per hire less than half of what contingency firms charge, with the winning candidate presented in an average of 14 days, all with a 12-month candidate warranty. With results like that, Decision Toolbox won't be a secret for long. Visit us at www.dtoolbox.com for more information.
Welcome back to the Talent Talk Radio Show. We're proud here to have Herb Callahan and Ed Rodriguez of Golden State Foods with us. Don't forget, you can tweet us at PeopleG2. Use that hashtag Talent Talk. Love to have you send questions, comments, make guest suggestions, whatever you like. But we were just talking before the break about getting senior buy-in, and they went out and got that. And then in my mind, the next thing is you got to get the buy-in of the people who are going to be using the system, that are going to be affected by the system, and to get them really, whether it's excited or on board or whatever it may be. So maybe you could talk a little bit about that. And as a segue to that, maybe you could start with how many, kind of reiterate how many people we're talking about, because you're a very large company all around the world. Maybe you could, Herb, you could maybe kind of give us a better framework of how many people might be affected by such a change inside of your company, and then maybe we could kind of transition to Ed about how that all kind of plays out.
Well, so the company itself, we're about 6,500 employees around the world. The Reader's Digest, or the elevator speech I give folks, is that we put product in 125,000 restaurants and stores in 60 countries on 5 continents. So you can imagine the workforce that goes along with that. So this implementation, this HRIS system that we're bringing in, initially will be for our domestic. And our domestic, and Ed, you may know the numbers better than I do, about 4,500.
About 5,000.
About 5,000 domestic associates. Our HR team. We've got, last time I counted on the org chart, about 55 folks nationally as part of the HR team. And then, of course, all the leaders that are part of that system. And it goes all the way down to the associates. The associates will have access to get their own information, to print up check stubs, to look at their benefits, to look at their pay.
Right.
All their data is in the system, so it really impacts all 4,500.
And so, Ed, how do you then get those people on board to want to do this?
Well, I think there's a concerted effort with communications and HR, and making sure, again, that we are aligned with our senior management along the way. So monthly conversations where we're talking to them about the progress that we're making, and the things that we need them to do to ensure that they stand behind the initiative. The other super exciting initiative that I really do want Herb to touch on, that I think touches this change management, cultural transformation, is the work that we're doing to update our leadership competencies, because I think that also helps illuminate how important it is not just to have the leader-led support at the top, but how that manifests itself across the organization.
Yeah, as we talked, and you've asked a couple times, how do you get buy-in? How do you get buy-in? Not only we get it from the senior folks, but we were also out in the field all the time getting information. So we looked at our leadership competencies that we've had since around 2009. We started with like 38 competencies that we've kind of grouped together under 13. We looked at that, and we looked at it because folks were asking, right? All the changes that we're talking about, one of the things that always strikes me is I think back, why are we doing this? Why do you have this cultural change? Because our culture is asking for it, right? So we're not pushing anything out that folks aren't asking for, because one of our values is maintain the highest standards, make the best products. So we're always about getting better, and I say that's one of the reasons that we're 70 years old and 45 plus locations, because we're striving to get better. But we looked at our leadership competencies and took that to the field and asked folks, what do you think? I don't even know how many facilities we hit, but Ed and I did this roadshow. We hit about 150 plus supervisors, general managers across all of our lines of business, all around the country, from the southeast to the northwest, and we called them competency workshops, and we shared our 13 competencies, added some other competencies just to see what they thought of that, and actually got feedback from all of these folks on what competencies are working well, what competencies do you need now, which ones do you need in the future. And just to get that data, to me, I'm sure I shared with Ed, I said, it feels like money, right? You've got feedback from 150 plus leaders in all different pieces of the parts of the company. It's just, for me, just looking at that data, I thought, this is fantastic. This is what we need to do. And we took that information, and that was kind of the kickoff to what the new competency model is going to look like, what our new tools are going to look like, all based off of feedback from 150 supervisors and above. And as we move through this journey, the one thing we always do with any process is we go back to the field and say, what do you think of this? What do you think of this? So we'll go back to those 150 at some point. We have another group of about 20 influencers, opinion leaders. We go out to them. These are the managers, the general managers that are running facilities. We get their input. So the greatest thing for me about all these processes is you're getting real data from the folks in the field that are impacted by it, which adds instant credibility to any process you're bringing back to them. They know that it's based off of their input, so you've got that credibility.
So as you're kind of looking at this performance-based culture that you're ultimately trying to take to this fullest extent, sounds a little bit, though, like your culture is about learning and growing and changing, that the change itself is a part of the culture. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, as I was saying earlier, I think we're changing. We have these initiatives because the culture demands it. The folks demand it. They want to get better. They want to be held accountable. They hold us accountable. The associates hold us accountable. The customer holds us accountable. So there is this culture of accountability, and part of that is getting better. So folks are looking to get better. So I think there's a constant look at, are these the right processes? Can we tweak it? I share with folks, I've heard quite a bit in the company is if you do something great, good, do it again, make sure it's not a fluke. If you do it great a second time, then tweak it, make it better. And I think that's part of our culture.
Yeah, a lot of these things we were doing before, so there's nothing new here. I go back to what we're doing is evolving the culture and fine-tuning some of these programs. In some cases, we're streamlining. In other cases, we're simplifying. We're making them a little bit user-friendly. But in this competency workshop process that Herb has led, it's been tremendously rewarding. We're emphasizing competencies around people development, innovation, change management, data-driven decision-making. Not that we weren't doing those things before, but as we went through these workshops and asked folks, what skills do you need today and in the future to make sure that GSF remains ahead of the curve, these are the things that they said, we ought to emphasize this and embed this into any performance management development process that we develop moving forward, and that's been extremely rewarding.
Were there any competencies that maybe you guys identified that they hadn't seen, but maybe they went, oh, yeah, that would be good? I mean, there has to be some forward thinking by somebody. I mean, because I could say right now, what I need right now is different than I might need in 5 years.
Right. So we presented them with, it's funny, we kind of gamified it. We took our competencies, we put them on flashcards. We created a game board that ranked the competencies from most effective to least effective, has the biggest impact, has the least impact. And then just we put them out there in no particular order, gave it to them and said, you guys talk about it. You tell us what's most effective, what's working, what's not working, what has an impact, what doesn't have an impact now and in the future. So they told us. So I think we have 20 competencies was the total. 10 of them were the ones that we currently had, and 10 were that Ed, myself, and one other person just looked at, and we each selected 10, put it all together, and said, well, here's the 10 that we want to introduce that are forward-thinking, that are more action-oriented, that we think might be important in the future. And we presented those total of 20 competencies to them and allowed them to go through the process to tell us what works, what do we want to keep, what do we need to add.
Right.
So that was the process.
Well, we're almost out of time. I want to make sure we ask one of our favorite questions, and either one of you can jump in if you have a great answer. Is there a book that maybe you've been recently reading, or one that you suggest that you might share with us?
Well, I think I mentioned it earlier. I read a book called Essentialism. It's about the discipline approach of doing less, right? And it sounds on the surface, it sounds a little like may lean towards laziness, but it's really about doing less, and those things that you do are doing them really, really effectively. So making sure that you're doing the right things as Ed and I talked about this, our framework of only doing things that fit within the framework. So great book. I think it's by George McCowan, called Essentialism.
Well, sounds like a great book to check out if it's helping you guys balance all of the wonderful things that you're doing at your company. I'm sure it's one that our listeners might want to check out. What's the best way for people to check out more about Golden State Foods if they're interested in coming to work for you or learning more? What is the best place for them to go?
I think goldenstatefoods.com is probably the best place to go. We've got a beautiful website, our communications team put together. There's a careers page there. So a really comprehensive website, easy to find all the openings, and tells a great story.
Fantastic. Well, Herb and Ed, thank you so much for being on the show today. Loved having you guys here. You're welcome back anytime you want to come and talk about all the great stuff that you're doing, and appreciate you sharing with us today.
Thank you for having us.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for listening to today's show. Hopefully you gained something that you can use in your own career in a positive way. Next week, my guest will be Dan Harris, Workplace Insight Analyst from Quantic Workplace, and then Ben Martinez, CEO and founder of Sumato Coffee. So until then, do what you love and show the world how talented you can be today.
You've been listening to Talent Talk Radio, brought to you by People G2.
Are you ready to tap into the power of social media to promote your business? It's easy to get social with Turn Up the Volume, the award-winning social media marketing professionals who know how to get results. Drive web traffic, boost sales, get social today. Visit www.turnupthevolume.com. That's turnupthevolume.com.
When it comes to pioneers in their respective industries, we